different. He started looking at the small houses. Look at all the buildings around here. Look at the little houses, because people like us who never had a big building, so to look at the little building, says, that's my mama's, that was my grandmother's, that was in our family. That gave us a sense of appreciation and appreciation for what we had. So that was his contribution. So besides developing Oktoberfest into a fabulous, fabulous festival, it was the beginning to emphasize the community as a whole that Lee Ethel gave us. And I know I've run all over the place, but thank you for this opportunity, and that's it.
Gentlemen are a hard act to follow. I am happy to be here. First of all, I want to thank the Pioneer Museum and Gerald Hoover, who's soon to retire. There he is. He gave us the opportunity to create and present this exhibition. And it's an important exhibition, and I was very happy to be a part of it. The truth is, almost 2 years ago, Leanne told me that she and her family were going to create an exhibition and a book on the art of her grandfather, Lee Ethel. Of course I wanted to help Leanne in any way I can. Honestly, I didn't know anything about the artist Lee Ethel. Leanne had given me and my husband Kevin a lovely wedding present of a framed, signed original color lithograph edition 30 by Lee Ethel. That beautiful original print picturing 2 cats and a patterned quilt was my only connection to the art of Lee Ethel. Fast forward. As the preparations for the exhibition and the exhibition catalog evolved and progressed, I learned a lot more about Lee Ethel, and I was impressed. But I was feeling guilty that I didn't know anything about this important artist. As I learned how prolific he was and how accomplished he was, I began to question why I didn't know anything about Lee Ethel's career or his artwork. And I'm supposed to be a Texas art authority. So, as I worked with Leanne on writing a grant application for support of the exhibition, some clues emerged about why Lee Ethel's art is well known and greatly respected in Fredericksburg. But why Lee Ethel's art is, but his career as a painter is not generally known beyond Fredericksburg. As we described in our grant application and in the exhibition catalog, and Lee Ann did a superb job with the catalog. If you don't have one, get one. This is a historic document. As we described in that catalog, Lee Ethel had 2 successful careers in art. First, he excelled as an illustrator and graphic designer in the highly competitive advertising market in Dallas, serving as production manager for A. Harris & Company, a major department store in downtown Dallas, which later became Sanger Harris. He also worked freelance for Neiman Marcus and for Lone Star Gas Company. Lee Ethel was indeed successful as a commercial artist, and he and his wife Betty purchased a home in Lake Highlands, an affluent area of Dallas. And in 1973, they purchased a second home in Fredericksburg, and they restored and renovated an historic house. However, a successful career as a commercial artist is not generally recognized by art critics and art historians. There has long been an unspoken prejudice against commercial artists who are erroneously considered unworthy to be included in the art historical record of fine art. Although illustrators create original artwork, those works usually are unsigned and they belong to the agency or the company. Universities have long struggled with having commercial art and also interior design in their art departments. And only fairly recently, most university art departments offer degrees in what they now call communication design. Lee Ethel obviously had good training at Los Angeles Art School. However, the stigma probably plagued Lee Ethel, who worked in the field of commercial art and marketing. Hence, the silence about his early career. In the 1960s, while his career as an illustrator and graphic designer prospered, his interest in fine art, and especially painting, increased. He enrolled in several informal night classes in painting at Southern Methodist University. He also began to paint lovely portraits of family members. He was identified in the commercial art world as Leland Ethel. But as he developed as a fine art painter, he signed his paintings Lee Ethel, an indication that he understood that he had two careers in art. In 1971, he was vice president of the art department of Glass Hughes, Inc., a large advertising agency in Dallas, while he was also pursuing his new career as a fine art painter. An article in the Dallas Morning News from August 23, 1970, announced that Lee Ethel, along with 3 other artists, was exhibiting his paintings for the first time at 2719 Gallery on Ruth Street. The short mention of the 2719 Gallery was included in an article which highlighted art exhibitions statewide, including an exhibition of works by Robert Rauschenberg at the McNay Art Institute in San Antonio, and an exhibition, quote, of controversial etchings by Beatle John Lennon in, at the Contemporary Gallery of the Quadrangle in Dallas. A photo of Lee Ethel's painting entitled Native Son No. 1 was included in the article. It is of a longhorn steer, and it gives us a glimpse about the painting, the kind of paintings that he was offering for sale at the 2719 Gallery. Lee Ann is doing a heroic job in keeping a good archival record of Lee Ethel's paintings, and she discovered that this painting, Native Son No. 1, was sold at auction a while back, but she doesn't know where the painting is now. The article also mentions that Gallery 2719 was only open by appointment. My editorial comment is this: that's not exactly a business, a successful business strategy. And that might actually account for the fact that Lee Ethel's early entrance into the fine art world is quiet. There is some evidence that in 1973, Lee Ethel opened his own art gallery on Ruth Street, which was then, and still is now, the center of fine art galleries in Dallas. Lee Ethel was an overachiever. He actively juggled a full-time career in advertising art while developing his career as a painter. He pursued his interest in painting scenes as he traveled to Rockport, Maine, to the Arkansas Ozarks, to Cape Cod, San Antonio, and other places. He was a prolific artist. This exhibition of his paintings of Fredericksburg represents only a small portion of his large output of fine art paintings. Lee Ethel's fine art painting style was derived from his training and ability as an illustrator. His fine art, however, was not formulaic, but it was methodological. He was prolific in his production of paintings because he created his own assignments, and he was able to complete paintings on a deadline. Lee Ann Watley, granddaughter of Lee Ethel, estimates that in 20 years that he was dedicated to fine art, Lee Ethel produced more than 300 paintings. That's 15 a month. He applied his techniques and abilities to his mission to document the German heritage architecture of Fredericksburg. Lee Ethel's connection with the fine art scene of Dallas and with the art department at SNU puzzled me. There's no information about, in the historical record of the art in Dallas, about the informal night classes that Lee Ethel participated in at SMU. And frankly, his 3 teachers at SMU were not distinguished artists. However, the director of the SMU art department at that time, when Lee Ethel studied painting, was Jerry Bywaters. Bywaters had retired from his position as director of the Dallas Museum of Fine Art, and he took the position at SMU in 1965. I bring Bywaters into the discussion because he was a major figure and a dynamic force in the 20th century world of Texas art. Lee Ethel must have encountered Bywaters. Although Bywaters was 20 years older than Lee Ethel, I think there must have been a connection. Bywaters took great interest in his students. I know, because Bywaters was one of my professors at SMU. Beyond the assumption that Bywaters took interest in Lee Ethel's development as a painter, I see definite stylistic similarities between Lee Ethel's art and Bywaters' art. In short, Bywaters often portrayed houses which he thought told valuable cultural and historic stories. Bywaters painted houses that he admired from his travels throughout the United States, including houses in Old Lyme, Connecticut, Victorian houses in Leadville, Colorado, adobe houses in New Mexico, and the list goes on. The similarities between Bywaters and Ethel in their portrayals of architecture have to be more than coincidental. Moreover, neither Bywaters nor Ethel were provincial in their artistic expressions. Ethel's art is not derivative, nor is it regressive. Lee Ethel may have been exposed to Bywaters' regional aesthetic. However, Bywaters was a generation earlier than Ethel, and by the 1970s, both regionalism and a realistic stylistic aesthetic were out of fashion. Realism in American art had evolved into abstraction, and a modernist stylistic revolution characterized the painting style of avant-garde American artists. Ethel's contemporaries had probably graduated from university art departments that taught abstract expressionism, and at that time, galleries vied for new artists who were producing action paintings. Lee Ethel perfected his own individual realistic style of painting at a time when abstraction was only revered by art critics, which accounts somewhat for the fact that the record of Lee Ethel's art is silent. However, there has to be more to the story. I recently talked with David Dyke, owner of the David Dyke Art Gallery and Auction in Dallas. David has been in the art business for more than 35 years, and he was also dismayed that he had never heard of Lee Ethel. I sent him a copy of the catalog for this exhibition, and he was blown away. In our conversation, we came to the conclusion that Lee Ethel was a very good, fine artist who developed his own individual style, and he was successful. The fact that his reputation was not recognized or celebrated in his own time by the art world is inconsequential. Art critics and curators essentially do not know about Ethel's art because he didn't enter juried exhibitions, he didn't receive reviews in the newspaper, and he didn't generally promote his own art because he didn't have to. Moreover, Lee Ethel's individual approach and his style was unique. He was definitely not a primitive, he was not a naive artist, but rather he was directed, highly competent, mission-driven artist. Although Ethel portrayed historic buildings, his paintings are not documentaries, nor are they memory paintings. His artwork is not like that of Grandma Moses or Clara Williamson. His portrayals of culturally important architecture are neither nostalgic nor romantic. Most of the buildings that he painted existed in his own day, and he researched historic photographs to ensure the accuracy of his portrayals. Nor are his paintings of important architecture merely illustrations, but rather careful depictions of historic importance of a particular place. In the larger sense, Lee Ethel's paintings of domestic and public architecture of Fredericksburg create a composite portrait of American culture. Lee Ethel was highly successful as a fine art painter. His art sold well, and it sold quickly, as evidenced by the fact that in this exhibition, all his paintings are from private collections. He didn't need the approval or inclusion in the contemporary art world. This exhibition proves that Lee Ethel made significant impact as a fine art painter because he captured the spirit, the heritage, and the history of Fredericksburg, a most important town in Texas. Thank you.
Before Glenn starts, I'm really sorry about our air conditioning system. We have two. There's one over here that when it kicks on is really loud and you do not hear them. The one in the back is the one that's over-functioning for your behalf tonight. So you up front are going to be sweltering a little bit. And if you have to get some extra air, move to the back of the building. But again, it's an old building, old units, and we're doing the best we can. So, Glenn.
Okay, my angle, if you're going to understand these buildings and Lee's contributions to them later, you have to understand how we got here. So I'm doing a little bit of a history overview for this. The preservation movement really started about 1929 when Bill Petnicky Sr. spoke at a Lions Club dinner and said, we really need to form an historical society before the old people are gone, which was very true. So in the 1930s, the Gillespie County Historical Society was formed with the primary purpose to reconstruct the Vereinskerke. And it's pronounced with an F, by the way, if you don't know German wording. That's the Society's church, originally built by the Adelsverein, the Society of Nobles that helped bring us over here. It was the first public building, and people confuse Vereinskirche with Vereinshaus. The Vereinshaus stood at our first site, which is now called Judy's Corner. She's here. Catty corner from the Nimitz. That's where the Vereinshaus was built in 45, 46 for the surveyors. That's where the officials stayed. That's where the commissary was. And that's where we camped our first night here, the 125 people. I guess the most historic corner in Fredericksburg. And it's, okay, it's very interesting. It was built in the middle of Main Street, as you mentioned, and good luck ever getting it back there. It was the center of the government square and the market square, which we call market lots. It was our first church, first school, and could have potentially been a fortress. And we always stress potentially, because we never had to use it because we had the peace treaty. So it was not a fortress. It could have been used as a fortress. And interestingly, the Vereinskerke was our first public building, and it was a church. And you go 20 miles down to Comfort to the Germans there, and they didn't build a church for over 30 years. Finally, a very brave Lutheran pastor wandered into town, and a few of the faithful started a church. The Vereinskerke was not built for all denominations, as somebody mistakenly wrote in the 20s or 30s. It was by contract for the Evangelisch, and it's evangelical for everybody now. In Germany, that was the Lutheran Church, and the Katholisch, the Roman Catholics. I remember thinking, yeah, right, the Catholics and Lutherans worshipped in the same building. I don't think so. And then I was in Kirchberg, Germany, and they worshipped together in the same building till the 1960s. About 1850, the Roman Catholics built a log church and sold their half of the Vereinskerke property to Holy Ghost, and that's why today they own the two Vereinskerke bells. So about 30 years, the Vereinskerke was actually a Lutheran church because Holy Ghost Lutheran Church stayed in the building. Then about the 1880s, they moved to the Meyer building next to the courthouse because the Vereinskerk was hastily built, was in poor condition, and basically falling down. And I laugh about when people brag that their ancestors helped build it. They were paid by the day and glad to get the job, but it was very not substantially done. And they stayed in there till they built their new church, completed in 1893. The Vereinskerk replica was built by the U.S. government with the Works program. And it's not an exact replica because I've been bitching for many, many years that it doesn't have two sets of double doors. We, as sexes, didn't go in the same doors together into the church. There was a door for the men and a door for the women, and even my childhood, the widowed men and the bachelors and young males sat on the left, and the women and families sat on the right. It was a holdover from those times. Now, we weren't quite like the Methodists that were so well, converts often go way out there somewhere. They had a 4-foot wall down the middle of the church so the sexes couldn't even see each other. Wow. Finally, the Vereinskerk ended up shade for the cows because they broke in the doors and were there. And then in the 50th anniversary celebration, it was a pavilion for our party. Now, interestingly, we had a petition in 1897 to save that building. Some of our citizens, I'm proud of that, because 99% of the population didn't care, but there was that little element that cared. By the way, the Gillespie County Historical Society also established the first library in the Vereinskerk, the town's first library in 1938, and the first museum mainly in 1946, when people had brought all these antiques to put in the store windows, and when the celebration was over, most of them didn't even want it back, that old junk. So they took it to the Vereinskerk and we had our first museum. Now, I don't know what you'd call that Meyer building that's on the corner you mentioned across from the courthouse, because it served as a church, the Sombritsky Saloon, the Meyer Saloon, a grocery store, and a bank. And if you want any Western flair from our town, that was the site of our only bank robbery, and even had somebody shooting out the upstairs window as the riders rode across the square. And they got away, we never got the money back. The bandstand that he uses a number of times, do not ever please call it a gazebo. We didn't even know what a gazebo was. It was built as a bandstand, and it was built 1921 to our 75th birthday present to ourselves. So it's a little forgotten back there, but it's important. Another very focal point of Ethel's paintings is the White Elephant Saloon, and I grew up thinking it was funny because it was really the silver elephant, because it's painted silver. I've never seen it white. Be sure you notice the beautiful ironwork, because I can remember when some of it fell on the sidewalk, and the city crew was asked to come, and they were bitching that they weren't going to pick up that metal for the blankety blank Glory Hill Hysterical Society. She was a very important part of preservation, but she was highly controversial because she'd tell you your house was the wrong color. She wanted to turn Main Street into a mall, and you're getting the picture. But she had a very important role in preservation. During Prohibition at the White Elephant Saloon, they still served beer during Prohibition in the back room. So it's going to be a saloon again because Hondo and Shotzi Crouch's daughter, among others, their granddaughter Alice, is going to restore it as a saloon. And as times change, even women will be allowed into the saloon. That's progress, I guess. You are equally employed, or whatever, get drunk too. The elephant, by the way, was commissioned by a man, and he really didn't know how to do that elephant. And the story was that he was down the creek and his feet sank in the sand, and he'd got the idea of a mold, and there was an Italian carousel operator on the square. And by the way, the early ones didn't have horses. That wasn't exotic to people who rode into town on a horse. They were African animals. So the elephant was on there, and he used that. All right, not a building, but a focal point of many of Lee's paintings is Cross Mountain, of course. So you need to know something about that. Our main street was first called San Saba Street because we were sort of the route between San Antonio and the San Saba Mission that the Comanches wiped out. By the way, Moisabah had already read about the San Saba Mission and Enchanted Rock while he was still in Germany as an intellectual. We speculate that an early group coming through saw that little bitty hill in the valley and decided to plant a cross on it, maybe a ceremony, maybe not. Then John Christian Durst, among the very early settlers, was looking for a cow. His rock buildings still stand on Lower Crabapple. A pharmacist owns that property now. And he saw that rotting cross and so stuck it back in the ground and called it Kreuzberg, the cross mountain in German. Later, Father Menzel replaced it with a more substantial cross, and later Arthur Staling paid for the lighted cross we have there now. The Historical Society at one time bought that hill because it was going to be road topping. I promise you. Germans were very practical people. They saved it and operated it for years until the vandalism got so bad we couldn't control that. There used to be a drive around the base of the hill, but that was so awful for all the property owners because God knows what they found in their backyards the next day. So that was closed off. Then we had to put a stile in so that people couldn't go up there on their horses, etc., etc., etc. Not everything Fredericksburg was perfect. There were some, we had a lot of wars, in fact. Now, Lee and Betty Ethel were transplants. This was not really their history, but they saw it immediately. They helped the natives see what they were missing. First of all, they restored that old Carl Henke house on the corner of Llano and Travis, and it just sold again. If those Henkes could see what that house brought, they probably paid $7. And or if Lee and Betty could see what it brought now. They probably saved that corner from becoming a convenience store. If you were a corner on Main Street as a pioneer home, it almost always became a convenience store. Luckily, the Klingelhofer house up on Main Street was once removed from a corner service station. He was a stonemason. By the way, Carl is very interesting because he's considered the first male born in Fredericksburg. He was born in 1848. We got here in 1846. So either the diet or the lack of diet or the starvation time was you couldn't conceive or the baby didn't live. So 2 years later we had our first son. The daughter was born in that house with the blue sky there. If I can see it right. Yes.
Right here. And then Carl Henke's house is the depiction on that wall
Yeah.
there.
And that one was later a funeral home and now it's a bank. So it's not
Wait,
there anymore.
I'm sorry, I think this has been torn down. It used to be on this wall.
I say it was later Beckman's funeral home and now is a bank.
Yeah, it's gone.
What?
It's gone, like you said. It's
Yeah.
gone.
Unfortunately,
Yeah.
I never even remember that one. I'm almost 100 years old. So they very likely saved that house by restoring it. And that's a blessing to me. Like this man here, I can't tell you how many sad memories I have of homes that didn't make it. The Ethels immediately became involved in the Historical Society, and it was my fortune to be on the board with Lee. And I always credit these paintings to Betty too, because if you lose a spouse or don't have somebody at home, it's hard to, for example, stay in the fields till dark if you don't have somebody fixing dinner. It's a coupled effort. He couldn't have painted as many pictures if he had to do everything that Betty did. All right, this is a fight. In the last year, we had a stone building torn down in Fredericksburg. I, of course, went to City Hall and left a 2-page tablet writing about it, never got a reply. It was I went to City Hall and told them, when those Kamla girls sell that little house on Creek Street, be sure that some dummy doesn't tear down that rock wall and act like, oh, I didn't know. And at Boot Ranch, the historic first log cabin of the Roses and their later rock house pushed on a pile because somebody wanted to build right there. When I went to look at it, they were kind of scared to tell me. Not that I had any influence or power, but they knew I'd be sick about it. So it's still being torn down. And the Historic Society and people like Lee and Betty and some of the rest of us had fought to keep those there. The point being that Lee Ethel brought our heritage to the attention of thousands and thousands of eyes. I'm very sure, like you say, some natives finally had pride when their ancestors' home was shown in a painting or preserved. He helped preserve this adaptive restoration that came about during that time, and he and I could tell you all the drama that went into saving almost every one of these places. And if you want to give somebody living in Dallas or New York City, your child or grandchild, a snapshot of Fredericksburg, what better thing to give them this summary of our town? It was a joint effort of these two people along with. Now I'm saying that particularly because they weren't from here. This wasn't their history. But you people who move here often help us much more than some of the natives. By the way, I don't think I can count 5 people born native here. So that's the way it is almost every gathering. So they were very important to us.
Thank you all so much. Your talks were very profound and important, and I can't thank you enough for being here and being a part of this dialogue tonight. If we weren't here, it was because of the Pioneer Museum, and Dr. Gerald Hoover was so enthusiastic about having this exhibition for the 170th anniversary, and he is now retiring forever. Okay.
So you're going to do a meeting at this time?
Yeah. So I would like for you to come here to the podium, so everyone can just give you a big old standing ovation. I'm not going to give you 15 minutes.
I'm one of those people in my family and moved in and adopted the town and the history as Lee and Betty apparently did. And it's been 25 years now, and it's been a good ride. Yes, I am leaving the museum, but we're staying here and getting involved in other things in the community. But I want to thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting Leanne. I'll tell you, she gives me a lot of credit. She did the work. She did the work to make it happen, to do the catalog, to recruit Francine. We worked together on the grants, recruiting these wonderful speakers, and keeping this open every day through the period. Hiring Julie Ballinger to do some children's work. You know that took a lot of time and effort, so she deserves a lot of credit too. We give her
All right, so I know there's other things going on tonight, but if y'all have any questions for anyone, now is your chance. Anybody at all have any questions for any of these speakers tonight? Yes, sir.
Dr. Fraser, I have a question for you about the methodology on the 2020 census. You know, if we had 10,000 somebody in 2010, and we're supposed to have 20 in 2020, we're supposed to have 20. But we also, at the same time, have lost